Michelle Cretella for her.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm actually going to start off by letting you know my 2 action steps up front. I'm thinking Matthew 17:21. Some evils, some demons are only cast out through prayer and fasting. So action step number 1, this is serious. When we're talking socialism and sexualization, we need to get serious. We need to fast and pray. Action step number 2, we need to act. Act like it all depends on us. Pray like it all depends on God. For your action step, I want you to go to kelseycoalition.org and focus on the first Do No Harm campaign, which you did hear about from Lynn. The first Do No Harm campaign, once you click on that project, will take you to a 1-page letter. There's a 1-page letter written by an expert in hormones, an endocrinologist, who is not affiliated with the American College of Pediatricians. And this is very important because the American College of Pediatricians and we've been the most outspoken critics. So, when people share our information, they're greeted with, they're a hate group. No, we are not. Okay, well, we're not, but most importantly, we're not the only physicians. More are starting to speak out. So kelseycoalition.org, first Do No Harm campaign. I want you to print out that informational letter and give it to every health professional you know, because health professionals are being lied to. They need to be informed. Pharmacists, nurses, physician's assistants, and of course, your doctors, pediatricians, internists, anyone and everyone you know in the health professions. We need to educate them. And then also the grassroots, your friends, fellow parents, grandparents, educate them with that letter. So those are the 2 action steps, right? Prayer and fasting, Kelsey Coalition's First Do No Harm campaign. What I want to spend the rest of my time doing is giving you 10 facts versus myths when it comes to the medical and psychological issues behind gender confusion. Now, as the last panel alluded to, and if there's one point you want to get across to people, is that children are being sterilized in the name of transgender rights. Now, are 100% of children on the medical pathway being sterilized? Not necessarily. But 1 child sterilized is 1 child too many. Okay? So, going down the sort of top 10 facts. Sex is binary. How do we know that? It's very simple. In the life sciences, basic science, sex is determined by how a species is designed to reproduce. Human beings reproduce with sperm and eggs. Those are 2 sex cells. The males are the ones who produce the sperm, the females produce the egg. 2 sexes. There's nothing else involved to making a baby. But we're told, whoa. What about intersex? There are intersex people. Let's take a step back. Hold on. Intersex is a catch-all term. It's about conditions, not people, conditions, birth defects that affect the reproductive organs and the genitalia. The proper term for intersex is disorders, plural, disorders of sexual development. They are exceedingly rare. 99.98% of babies born have normal genitalia. 99.98% have normal genitalia at birth. They are clearly male or female. But that 0.02% of the time, you may have a baby born with, it's called ambiguous genitalia. And their sex, their birth defect and sex will need to be diagnosed through medical testing. There are only two human sexes, male, produce sperm, female, produce eggs. Intersex conditions are not a third sex. Intersex conditions are very rare birth defects that affect the reproductive system and the genitalia. So it's very important to have that clear. Now, next, and this is very important. We are born transgender. It's who we are. Really? Show me the test. Where's the medical test for that? The blood test, the chromosome test, the brain scan. There is no medical test for gender identity because gender identity is in the mind, not the body. All right? So this brings up another important point. Try to use only the word sex when you're talking about people, because the left, well, I shouldn't say it, the transgender activists have weaponized the word gender. You know, there was a point in time when gender and sex were synonyms, not so anymore, okay? So, for example, the transgender activists are saying, oh, people are born with a sex, that's what's between your legs, but people are also born with a gender that, you know, and that's in the brain that could be different from no, that's baloney. That is not science, that's science fiction. So to try, just in terms of a strategic point here, you have a daughter and she's pregnant with your first grandchild. Your daughter's not going to have a gender reveal party. She's having a sex reveal party. Okay? People have a sex because that means one thing, inborn biological trait. Gender, forget about it. Talk sex. Gender identity means an awareness of your sex. Gender identity is not in the body. It develops over time. It's in your mind. So as much as possible, because revolution starts with language, let's try to get ourselves very clear. Let's try to avoid the left language, avoid the transgender language. Use sex when we're talking about people. Sex, gender identity, and a normal gender identity matches your sex. People who believe they are something they are not are at best confused. So this is point number 3, which is just common sense. And everyone understands this. I mean, if you met me for the first time and in our conversation I tell you that, hey, you know what, I'm a 6'5" African-American basketball player, you would probably run away. Clearly, at best, I would be confused, and at worst, incredibly delusional. So that's just a basic concept that anyone with common sense should be able to understand. 4, and this is an important talking point. Puberty is not a disease. The absence of puberty is. And in fact, repeat it after me. Puberty is not a disease. Absence of puberty is. And that is crucial, because what we're hearing now, we're being told by the so-called gender specialists that puberty blockers are harmless because they're reversible. Okay. Wrong. Let's back up. Well, we use them. We use the puberty blockers in kids with precocious puberty. All right. Well, Mr. Brilliant gender specialist doctor, what is precocious puberty? It's a disease. Precocious means early puberty. If we have a child who's going through puberty at age 4 or 5, there are harmful effects from going through puberty at 4 or 5. So we can give puberty blockers to a 4 or 5-year-old temporarily for a few years. That way, he or she will go through puberty at the same time, the normal period, as their peers. There are still side effects, but as there is with anything, with any medical disease, every treatment has potential side effects. But it's risk versus, there's that risk-benefit ratio. When a child has disease, you give the puberty blockers to get them to the right point in time. Fine. We're not dealing, when we have children who think that they are the opposite sex, okay, that is not a physical disease. That is a confusion of the mind. Their bodies are totally healthy. So when you give puberty blockers to an 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, you are stealing from that child. You are stealing that child's normal, healthy development. Puberty is a critical developmental period that impacts every body system. It impacts, during puberty, the sex hormones organize the development of the brain. Not just how you're, in guys, you think, oh, broad shoulders, deep voice, production of hair, muscles. Yep, it does all those typical sexual effects, yes, but the sex hormones impact the neurological wiring of the brain. And the sex hormones impact the density and strength of your bones. When we give puberty blockers to children who are physically healthy at their normal pubertal age, we are stealing that time and development away from them. So if they're on puberty blockers from age 12 to 14, and then say, oh, you know what, forget it, this was a mistake, I want to come off. We can't give them those 2 years of normal development, not only those 2 years of normal physiologic development, but those 2 years of normal psychosocial development back. We have robbed them of that. P.S. There's only been one study of children put on puberty blockers who've been followed to adulthood. 100% of those children asked for cross-sex hormones. So now normally, if you have young children who are confused about their gender, pre-puberty, they're confused, normally 85% or more will accept their bodies by the time they're young adults. So putting them on puberty blockers seems to increase the likelihood that they will not embrace their bodies. They will go on to follow a transgender pathway. When that happens, if you have, and this is what was alluded to in the last panel, if you have a young child put on puberty blockers between the ages of 8 and 12, the puberty blockers prevents the development or the release of ovaries. You don't mature your ovaries if you're a girl, and you won't mature your sperm if you're a boy. Now you go on the cross-sex hormones between 12 and 16. That combination then chemically sterilizes the child permanently. So it's the combination of blockers early, which prevents the development of the eggs in the girl, the sperm in a boy, combined with the wrong sex hormones later on. They will never be able to produce eggs. They will never be able to produce sperm. And then, of course, afterwards, if they decide to have their reproductive organs removed, well, it doesn't matter at what point you've got those medications. Once your reproductive organs are gone, they're gone. So yes, children are being sterilized by this pathway. While it's true that the vast majority of young kids with the gender confusion will come out of it, the crucial part to understand is if they are supported through natural puberty. So in other words, as their body's maturing, yes, there's anxiety and there can be depression, but we must support them, and this speaks to the issue of therapy. Psychotherapy really needs to focus not so much on the gender, aspect, but on the depression, the anxiety, underlying trauma, and the child's identity. Every adolescent's job is to figure out who they are and what will their identity be, what will their role be. That is what a good, solid psychotherapist needs to work on with families and the individual child. So, and that's the point, that if we can get our friends, family members, and other health professionals to understand, most of the teens who are struggling with this, they are ordinary boys and girls who are depressed, anxious, uncomfortable in their bodies, getting the message from social media, schools, and Hollywood is huge, right? That, oh, the answer to your distress is you were born in the wrong body. This message is huge, and they're immersed in it. Excuse me. If sorry. on top of that, if they are on the autism spectrum or have ADD or any kind of developmental disability, they are at greater risk for the social contagion. And finally, when it comes to suicide and the threat of suicide, while we absolutely must take every suicide threat seriously, the transgender issue is the only one in which physicians say, oh yes, here's the prescription pad, tell us what to do. Lots of kids threaten suicide, lots of adults threaten suicide. In every other case, health professionals look at that and say, this is a cry for help. And our response is, we're going to help you. You're not alone. Let's take a breath, let's take a step back and start from the beginning. And we talk about the person's life right in at that moment, and then you work back. I'm no longer in clinical practice. I was in clinical pediatrics for 17 years. I had hundreds of girls, teens, boys who would come in suicidal, and they wanted to know that they were not alone. They wanted to know that someone was going to listen to them and embrace them and help them along the way. If you're a parent, and Lynn and Erin did an amazing job answering that question, that is the first response. I mean, yes, as a parent, you have a lot stacked against you, particularly on this issue, but let your child know, I love you. We want to get through this with you together. And then try. And then, I'm so sorry. But the love is the most important element that must come across. Thank you.